Hey boys and girls, it's that time. Time for the internet's favorite topic, saying nice things about the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Now look, the sequels have been totally talked to death, so I want to cover a topic that's less covered on this trilogy, the lightsaber duels. Now we're not going to talk about every duel in the sequels, not the big wet one, not this one that's freaking rad, and certainly not that horrible excuse for a movie climax. No, we're going to talk about the most slept on duel in the entire Star Wars saga, Rey versus Kylo at the end of Force Awakens. Now there are a lot of things that make this fight rad. From the fact that the lightsabers feel heavier and have a lot more oomph so they swing like actual swords, to the brilliant decision to illuminate the lightsabers on set for the first time, lighting up the snow and giving the final fight a gorgeous color palette. To the way the lightsabers interact with the environment around them, cutting trees in half, and every time they touch the snow it evaporates instantly. It's pretty sick. But this duel in particular seems to get a lot of attention for another reason. There's a certain subset of Star Wars fans that simply can't accept that an untrained Rey could have ever possibly beaten a badass Sith like Kylo Ren. I've heard this argument a million times, and it never ceases to bother me. Because if you just watch the movie in its entirety, it shows you exactly why this untrained nobody would be able to beat a man trained by Luke Skywalker. And for the sake of my argument, let's pretend you haven't seen any Star Wars before. We're going to imagine that The Force Awakens is your very first exposure to the franchise, because everything you need to understand about why this fight goes the way it does is laid out entirely within this film. Now this first point is fairly obvious, but Kylo is severely wounded during this fight. And I mean, not just like a little injured, like a sprained ankle or Jordan playing with the flu, I mean like bleeding out wounded. Before the fight even starts, he gets shot in the side with a blaster. And not just any blaster, but a bowcaster. And the movie goes out of its way to show us just how powerful the bowcaster is. It can do this.
You okay? Wow.
And this. And this.
I like this thing.
Yeah, Han. Me too. Now, Kylo doesn't also fly 20 feet in the air because the bolt just skims his side since Chewie is a bad shot, which the movie also shows us earlier, but it's clearly shown that he's in a lot of pain and losing a lot of blood just from swinging his sword with this open wound in his side. And early in the fight, while Kylo is just toying with Finn, Finn gets a shot in on his right shoulder. Another place it would hurt a lot while you're swinging a sword. Another kind of obvious one, but Rey has a very big stick. And from very early on in the movie, it's made clear she really knows how to use it. And I know what some of you are thinking. Is fighting with a staff really applicable to sword fighting? And as someone who's trained extensively in kendo, jodo, fighting with a bow staff along with several other weapons... God, that's the dorkiest thing I've ever said. Yeah, a staff and a sword are pretty different weapons. However, the spacing, footwork, and strength and speed you need in your arms and wrists is pretty transferable from a staff to a sword. And while a real-life sword can only cut cleanly at precise angles, a lightsaber cuts through anything like butter. And yes, a lightsaber is
an elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
It can also tear shit apart with no precision or training at all, which makes Rey's skills with a bow staff even more transferable. And the first move Rey does is jabbing at Kylo with the tip of the lightsaber to keep her distance, something you would do if you were fighting someone with a sword and you had a staff. And that's what she does most of the fight. She's mostly just running away, cutting down trees to get in Kylo's way, anything she can do to keep her distance and survive. To add to all this, Rey clearly has a deep Force connection with Luke's lightsaber. It lures her in earlier in the film, and it's made clear that the weapon and Rey are cosmically drawn together. And for those really dozing off in the back of the theater, Maz literally says that the lightsaber calls to you. So even though Kylo thinks the weapon is rightfully his, clearly the sword itself thinks otherwise. There's an important philosophy in martial arts that comes from Buddhism called Mushin, which is usually translated as no mind or without mind if you want a more literal translation. It's essentially a flow state, a state of Zen where your mind is fully present, free from the pressures and anxieties concerned with the past and future. I think the closest equivalent we have in English is being in the zone. And if you've seen the movie Soule, they do a great job of explaining the zone, or Mushin, as the space between the spiritual and the physical. Star Wars relies heavily on this idea. You need to be focused and present to be able to use the Force. So if you're strong with the Force and in a Mushin state of mind, even if you have no training whatsoever, you can, I don't know, block lasers blindfolded or nail a 2-meter wide hole with a proton torpedo, for example. But again, let's assume you haven't seen any Star Wars before The Force Awakens. During Rey's first encounter with Kylo, we see what happens when she fights afraid, conflicted, under emotional distress. And it looks a lot like the beginning of her later fight with Kylo. She's just running away, trying to buy time. When Kylo is focused and Rey is afraid, it's a very easy win for Kylo. But for their later fight, J.J. Abrams makes it very clear that Kylo is not in the zone. Now, what could take you out of the zone other than, say, searing pain from being shot by a blaster is, of course, being emotionally conflicted and being unsure of yourself. And Kylo is all of that. About an hour into the movie, Kylo tells us,
I feel it again. The pull to the light. Supreme Leader senses it.
And later, Leia reinforces that by saying to Han,
There's still light in him, I know it.
Then we get the scene where Kylo kills Han, and just before he does that, he tells Han,
I'm being torn apart. I want to be free of this pain.
We see his face half in blue, half in red, visually showing his inner conflict, his indecision. And after he kills Han, we get this lingering shot on his face, not showing reassuredness, but showing inner turmoil, perhaps even regret. Literally the opposite of being Mushin. And that inner distress that the movie has already shown us makes you worse at fighting is exactly what Kylo is carrying into his fight with Rey and Finn. Towards the end of the fight, his fighting becomes much less refined. His slashes become slow, heavy, almost amateurish, showing us not just his physical pain, but his mental anguish is causing his fighting to degrade. And before we get to the most controversial part of the fight, let's talk a little bit about how the Force is portrayed in this movie. The Force Awakens has some of my favorite Force use moments in any Star Wars movie. I mean, I still poop my pants a little bit every time I see this scene. And this movie makes it very clear exactly how one goes about using the Force. And nowhere is that made more clear than in the sequence with Rey's interrogation and subsequent escape on Starkiller Base. The sequence starts by showing us that Kylo underestimates Rey. When he tries doing his Force interrogation on her that he earlier did on Poe, not only is she so strong with the Force that she can resist him, but she actually outmatches him. And again, for those who are really still asleep in the back of the theater, like 1 second later, Kylo says out loud,
She is strong with the Force. Untrained, but stronger than she knows.
Then we see Rey trying and failing frantically to use the Force to escape. But she's already learned from Kylo that if you have the Force, you can tap into someone's mind, so why not try out a Force mind trick? And it doesn't really work. She's trying a little too hard to focus, but we get this great music cue, her face loosens, and she's no longer trying to focus, now she is fully present.
You will remove these restraints and leave this cell with the door open.
And I absolutely love that the Force has a little sound effect in this movie. And now, back to the fight. The part you've all been waiting for. The line that launched 10,000 angry comments. When Kylo says,
You need a teacher! I can show you the ways of the Force!
and suddenly Rey remembers that she's allowed to use the Force in this fight. Admittedly, I'm not gonna pretend like this line isn't hella cheesy, and it's clearly just this movie trying to have a use the Force Luke moment in it, but it does show us three very crucial things. One, it tells us that Kylo wasn't actually trying to kill Rey this whole time. He was just trying to capture her and bring her back to Snoke to make up for his earlier failures. Two, Rey's reaction shows us that she wasn't using the Force this whole time or even present at all, as if that wasn't obvious enough already. And three, we see Rey do exactly what she did during her escape. Her face is unsteady, rapidly blinking, so she closes her eyes, centers herself, and when she opens her eyes, she is in the zone. She is Mushin. She is following her instincts and letting her actions flow with the Force. And now that she's more in the zone than the emotionally unstable Kylo, she's able to catch him off guard, put him on the back foot, stab him a few more times for good measure, and cut homie's face wide open. And just to appease all the nerds who really thought Kylo should have won, we get a Deus Ex Machina in the form of the ground splitting open between them, firmly putting an end to the fight. And honestly, that was probably necessary because Kylo getting his face cut open might have really put him over the edge and he might have gone sicko mode and just killed Rey. However, the second Rey got the upper hand, the duel came to an immediate end. Honestly, since 2015, it has really pissed me off people left the theater thinking there's no way Rey could have beaten Kylo, because it points to a much larger issue among moviegoers. And no, not the issue you're thinking of, although that is still definitely a big one. It's the fact that movie studios treat audiences like we're stupid, and in some cases, it kinda seems like they're right. An N+1 magazine article from earlier this year revealed that Netflix executives send scripts back to the writers and request that characters narrate their actions. You see, Netflix wants to dumb down scripts to accommodate viewers who are on their phone or not really paying attention. Although this report only covers Netflix, if you've gone to the movies in the last decade or so, you've probably noticed this a lot more, where characters will explain something that's already been demonstrated, whether it's that they're in love, or that they're angry, or that they have a certain skill set, or even worse, after a movie already explains something, they'll just have another character explain it again, and they always start that by having them say my least favorite line to hear in any movie, which is,
So, what you're saying is...
Even little things, like when a movie will show a sweeping shot of the Capitol building and it'll say in big block letters, Washington, D.C. It's like, hey Marvel, we know where the Capitol building is, and if the audience didn't, how would putting the letters on screen even help? Whereas The Force Awakens is set on fictional planets that are even new to the Star Wars universe, and never once do they go, Jakku, or Star Killer Base, because the audience will just figure it out along the way. And yes, Force Awakens does do some over-explaining and does a lot of pandering to the audience, but it treats the audience with respect in terms of storytelling. There is so much great, visually driven character work in this movie, way more than any other Disney-era Star Wars film. And that's what makes movies unique from theater and TV. They are a storytelling medium driven by visuals, music, and sound effects, much more than just dialogue. But for some reason, it seems that some Star Wars fans will prefer to be spoon-fed story and character. They would prefer someone explain how cool Rey is and how good at fighting she is, rather than showing us exactly what makes her special. Now look, if you don't like Force Awakens as a movie, I don't blame you. It's got a lot of problems. But if you still think, after all this, that it's total bullshit that Rey beat Kylo at the end of the movie, well, you might want to consider sexism is the problem. Look, if you think it makes total sense that a 9-year-old Anakin could blow up that big space donut by accident, but it makes no sense that Rey beat Kylo, I'm not saying you are a misogynist, I'm just saying you might want to look into it. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because if you don't, what's a good threat? I'll make more videos about the Star Wars sequels being good.